What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we go over the magic stories, or review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizard's website. This week, we have The Race Part 2, once again by the R&D narrative team. This is seemingly the final story of Ixalan, and we will move on to probably some filler stuff before we get into Rivals of Ixalan stories, but we'll figure that out as the weeks go on. My quick review at the beginning is I had no problems with this one. It was definitely not the best one from Ixalan, but we've had some not so good ones this time around, and I had no issues with this one. I thought this was just fine.
I have to agree. I would say it's not super enjoyable. I would say it's not skippable. I would say it's not... I have no complaints.
Right. I think it did its job. I just don't think it was any kind of a masterpiece. So, but regardless, that's our quick review in the beginning. If you should go read the story and then come back here. As we said, we review, we do not summarize. On to the full review itself. This story, it tried to hit everybody like last story, but I think it did it better.
Yes.
I think it did, because what it did was it allowed us to see different people without having to have their perspective be told. We never saw Tishana's perspective. We never saw Angrath's perspective. We never saw Vona's perspective. We never even heard Vona's name. But we know that all of these characters were represented.
Right.
Some of them spoke, some of them didn't. I think Vona simply attacked. Maybe she said something that I don't exactly recall off the top of my head, but she had a pretty big part, and I was actually really happy to see. I was kind of afraid when Jason Veraska came up against Vona. I was kind of afraid that she was going to go the route of Brizella and the eternalized Minotaur, whose name I'm now not going to remember from Amonkhet, and Hour of Devastation. But namely,
I don't know that.
Big bad enemies, big bad mythic creatures that just die very easily kind of the first time we see them do any fighting whatsoever. And this time that didn't happen. Vona got some licks in and then was able to run away. She stole the thematic compass and was able to abscond, to use Tishana's words, or Watley's, I don't really remember. But
Tishana would say that, not Watley.
She's the warrior poet. That's why I thought those two were an interesting combination. Despite the fact, but well, we'll get to that in a minute. But so Vona was actually able to do stuff in this one, and yet we didn't need to hear from her, right? We didn't need to be in her head knowing what she was thinking, because it was pretty clear what she was thinking. She's like, I'm gonna get there first. I'm gonna take your stuff. I'm gonna kick your ass, and I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
And she did. She did a damn good job of fighting off two pretty powerful planeswalkers. Although, since Jace wasn't at full power or didn't remember his full powers, it was kind of 1.5 planeswalkers, but still. I think it worked out really well. And then even going up against Watley, Watley did a pretty sweet job too.
Yeah. I was impressed.
Yes, agreed. Well, and because I wrote a note about it, Watley at one point said, towards the end of where we hear from Watley from this one, she says, great, the murder monster wants to be my friend, because she was talking to Angrath, or Angrath was talking to her, and he finally kind of gets his moment of like, no, seriously, come with me, we can help each other. And she kind of seemingly is begrudgingly going to be going with him, even though she was like, I don't want anything to do with you. And then he tried to attack her, but then was like, look, I'm not actually trying to hurt you, we're going to work together because we have to go in there and just kill everyone, right? And she was like, okay. So, but I wrote the fact that she calls him the murder monster, which is hilarious. And she was rolling her eyes a lot at Tishana, right? I think they mentioned it like 4 or 5 times.
I thought it was more like 9 or 10.
I think it may have just felt that way.
No, I think it really was.
However many times it was, I literally wrote this, and the Angrath comment and the eye rolling was more personality shown by Watley in those couple of things sprinkled in there than the last 2 stories we saw that she was in, including the one that was fully about her.
Yeah, and you were writing that down just as I said that to you.
Agreed, absolutely. I was about to write it down, and
It's
you
not
were
the kind
saying
of thing
it.
where you're like, I feel like this could be the case. No, it's really apparent that they listened when us and or people said, yeah, Watley sucks. And now she has an actual personality, and it's actually likable.
I was just going to say, and it's a good one. It's not just, all right, we got to give her something, come up with something quickly.
Right.
It's like, no.
Because as we were going through, I said, oh, she's so great. And then I was like, oh, she has a personality in this one.
Yeah, I actually get to have an
that
opinion.
we met her already,
Yeah.
and she wasn't great.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it was very obvious that this is what it was. I think it worked out very nicely. And I liked that and that aspect of storytelling. I kind of hinted at this earlier, but to definitively say it, I liked the fact that they were able to add in some of these other pretty important secondary characters like Tishana and Vona and Angrath without actually having to put their perspective into it like the last story did, because we felt like that was just jumping around so much and it didn't actually let you into the meat of anything because it was so focused on being everywhere at once. This one allowed you to be in 1 or 2 people's heads. I mean, I think the whole story was in like 3 people's heads, but regardless, you really got kind of the condensed version of what was going on, and it still did its job of you kind of being able to tell everyone's motivations without actually having to be in their mind and have them say, I'm doing this because I feel sad or I'm angry or whatever.
And the different perspectives felt like flawless transitions.
Yes.
It did not feel like separate vignettes. It did not feel like pieced together bullshit.
Yeah.
It felt actually like a story. Not multiple stories that they just kind of shoved into one. It felt like a story.
Yeah. And barring one moment, which we'll talk about in a minute when I talk about a problem that I may have had with the story, it didn't, even though it was jumping from perspective to perspective about what was going on in a similar area, it didn't repeat itself within the story, despite the fact that that is a problem that we have had in this set of stories in particular in the past.
Oh God, yes.
But that being said, some of you may know where I'm going with this because I talked about it last week. I talked about it the week before, but not because it was repetitive, but because that was the first time it was said, was 2 weeks ago. Last week I talked about it, and this week I'm talking about it again because did you guys know that Jace listened when Veraska told her story? I didn't know that because they mentioned it to us this week, but they also mentioned it to us last week, and it actually happened 2 weeks ago, and then I'm pretty sure they acknowledged it 2 weeks ago as well.
Right.
And you know what sucks? Last week I made this comment, and this week it's even more so. That moment was amazing. I liked that moment a lot. Excuse me, and without going into specifics, go watch our show 2 weeks ago, and I will have given the reason for it, but it was so beautifully done. It was so appropriate for the moment and appropriate for the storytelling that they were trying to do. And in my opinion, and possibly Amy's because she's shaking her head yes, but in my opinion, you've now watered it down so much that it's not as special anymore. Because you've beaten this dead horse. And now I'm not as happy about it. Because every time I hear it, I'm like, yes, I get it. He listened. She's happy about it. Now, for this story, I can partially understand why they did it. And they did it because this story in and of itself had a Jace Veraska arc in it. A beginning, a middle, and an end. And the beginning was Veraska coming to the realization, as she says for the first time, which is odd, but she's coming to the realization for the first time that Jace, as she puts it, this man, is someone that she can trust. And is someone that she can kind of put her trust in, and he will care for her and care about her. Amy's response at that point, and you can add your opinions in as well, but I agree, was now she says this? Because all of the time leading up to this point, in that moment when she said, now I believe that he's the man I can trust, nothing had happened in that one moment, except that she was just sitting there thinking about it more. Which really just means, oh, you're in my perspective now? Okay, now I can tell you that I believe this.
Right.
Except that the moment that should have been what happened, I guess, was when it was being told from Jace's perspective, so we didn't know that Veraska would have felt that way, so they waited until now to be like, this is the moment. This arbitrary second,
Right.
when I'm thinking about it, is the moment where I realize that I could be friends with him, or more so, you know, I could ask him out on a date, and he's a good prospect of somebody to be with. But it's like, that took a lot. Why did it take? Nothing happened.
Especially since all of the other things already happened, this feels late and contrived and fake and stupid and...
Now I will say, just as a caveat and to cover myself a little bit, just in case, I have thankfully, of course, never been in the mental state or the position that Veraska has been in within these stories. And yet, and so this may be a way that the storytellers are trying to say that it takes a while for someone to build up that kind of trust in someone, because when your trust is given to someone and then broken, and then given and then broken, and then given and then broken, it takes you longer to trust them. But I think my point is, there was not a further moment that occurred that would have made that trust seem, or that statement even, seem welcome in that exact moment. I think that's my point.
There was nothing there to solidify that trust.
Correct.
And there was plenty of stuff prior to that point to solidify that trust.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes it feel so...
forced, contrived. Yeah. Well, and that's why I say that, you know, I gave the reasons behind it of, like, it seems like it was just, we're in her perspective, let's say it now definitively. And again, it's important because, as I was saying, that was the beginning, really, was her saying, I can trust this guy, he's a prospect, maybe I'll ask him on a date. The middle of it was this woman, this Gorgon, this person, who was earlier on in this set's stories unwilling to be touched, to the point where she lashed out and in anger and fear upon just being tapped or clapped on the shoulder. This same person now reaches out for Jace as he is falling to his peril. And this is something that I said earlier on in those stories as well, is that if you looked at the Perilous Voyage card, the 5th story spotlight, which we hit today, although it was with a different piece of art, a pretty sweet piece of art, but a different piece of art for kind of obvious reasons, because they didn't want to reveal Araska fully in this set, seemingly, and so they showed a different art for Perilous Voyage, a different perspective being shown, so that you could actually see the Golden City in the background. But regardless, we see the 5th story spotlight, and while they are explaining that scene to us, it is Veraska reaching out, barely touching Jace's fingers as he then falls away. And so that's the middle, if you will, even though it was towards the end of the story.
And that's a story spotlight.
For good reason.
Except that they didn't really focus on that as much.
Right.
The fact that they focused on the fact that Veraska was so terrified by being touched earlier in the stories should have made that story spotlight more prominent. And the fact that she had developed such a relationship with him should have made that story spotlight more prominent. And I think that story spotlight was dampened by the fact that they spent too much time reiterating the relationship that was already there, or like making it start over almost, and not even talking about the fact that in that moment wanting to touch him was such a contrast to how she was a very short period of time ago.
Right. And now if I were having this discussion with you and trying to play devil's advocate, I think my response to that would be, well, they shouldn't have to tell you because that happened earlier on and they want you to be able to follow along enough where they don't have to spoon feed it to you. But if that's the case, then why earlier on in this same story did you tell me for the third time that he listened when no one else would listen?
Exactly.
So it's
the stuff that they focus on was the wrong things.
Based on storytelling, I'm okay with either one, but be consistent then.
Yeah.
Pick one or the other. Either remind us of it and let this be kind of its own standalone story that somebody could pick this one up, read it as the final story and be like, wow, what's going on here? And want to read the other ones because it kind of gives you little snippets in there. Or assume that people have read all of the other ones and don't give them the backstory behind it for the third time.
Right.
Again,
Right.
either way, just pick one.
Just pick one.
Instead of doing a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, it's a little disjointed.
It's counter to what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. It's a little disjointed. And again, the Perilous Voyage portion, the story spotlight, was the middle of that arc from this story because then the final arc was Jace regaining his memories after a blow to the head, kind of projecting them outwardly, seemingly because he can't control it because he's hurt, and kind of showing Ravnica in general, but then specifically his time becoming the Guild Pact, the Living Guild Pact. And I thought that was cool, right? I mean, she would be the only person who would be aware of what she was seeing.
Yeah.
Possibly, I would say even with the other members of the Gatewatch, like they've seen Ravnica because they've been there with Jace,
they weren't there when these memories could have possibly occurred.
Right, plus...
And even if she wasn't there with Jace, she was on Ravnica and she could understand that memory better than anyone.
Well, because she knew who the other Maze Runners were. She knew who Niv Mizzet was, enough to look and say, oh, that's what I'm looking at, right? Like, it was then obvious to her at that point. So, I liked that. I think that was a nice kind of moment of dread for her in saying, like, oh no, he's getting his memories back. This is it, it's over, you know?
I liked how they introduced that segment to us.
Okay.
Because it was a little elusive in the beginning. And so then, we had to get to the meat of it a little bit more before I could then look at you and say, oh, okay, so he's got a head injury, he's getting all of his memories back, and his mind is linked with Vraska's, and she's experiencing his memories. So that part was really cool. But then it just went right back to the same shit we've been hearing. Oh, well, now it's gonna suck, because he's gonna get all his memories back, and then he's not gonna like me anymore, and blah. Well, grow a set and tell him you want to go out with him, bitch.
Well, I think that it's, in my opinion, it's kind of obvious, right? That they're going to have some kind of a confrontation, verbal, maybe physical, but then they will Jace will have both sets of memories. He will have the memories from Ixalan, but he will also have the memories back from Ravnica. He will see that she is not as bad of a person as he thought she was. Maybe there is her side to the story, and he might take some time and actually listen to it, because I doubt that the next story begins with Jace just being like, Vraska, and just crushing her mind, and then that's the end of it.
I agree that that's how that's going to go, but I'm not happy about it.
What would you like to see?
Well, because I hate the old Jace, and I like the new Jace. So what I would like to see happen is that the new Jace is the evolved Jace. So when he gets his old memories back, he realizes he was just wrong and stupid and shitty, and now he's just going to be the new Jace instead of being a combination of the two, which is what I assume will actually
I was just
happen.
going to say, I also assume that is what is going to happen, is that he will take some of his new experiences from Ixalan, combine them with his old experiences, etc. Now, my question is, or my comment is, I don't know if he's actually getting all of his memories back. Right now, all we know is that he is remembering Ravnica. Now, if you all remember, and if you remember, and I'm sure you all do, Vraska has been talking to him about Ravnica. So that, in and of itself, that world is present in his mind, at least as a concept, because Vraska has been talking about it, and she's told him about those things. That could be the only part of his memory that he's getting back, although Vraska's fears...
Seeing it, though, I mean...
Well, no, that's fine. I'm just saying I don't know that he would then also remember Kaladesh and Amonkhet and Nicol Bolas and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I got you there.
He very well could remember everything from Ravnica, which would still confirm Vraska's fears of, oh man, he's going to remember everything about me.
Right.
But I don't know that means that he's going to be like, oh man, it's Nicol Bolas, I got to go get him. What happened to the other members of the Gatewatch? I got to go save them.
Yeah, let me call Gideon or
Right,
whatever.
right. You know, and then try to planeswalk away, realize you can't planeswalk away, like go get the compass and go find the immortal sun or whatever. So I like that we don't technically know. Vraska kind of made the blanket statement of like, he's getting all his memories back. But I don't know. I don't know that that's true. I think that they've given themselves an out where you'll still have to close this arc because he's going to get his memories of who Vraska was back, but he might not immediately get his memories of Nicol Bolas, Amonkhet, maybe even the Gatewatch back yet.
Right.
So we'll have to see where that goes. We'll have to see which Jace we get. Do we get just another fractured portion of his mind back, and then he slowly evolves, as you put it, into the man that he's going to be? I hope that that's the case. I don't have any, I wouldn't be surprised if that's not what happens, unfortunately, but I think we'll have to see. I don't know that I had lots more to talk about this week. I liked the fact that Vraska at one point said that she is looking forward to petrifying the person who made Jace lose his memories. Which also is another reason to believe that that Jace will not fully hate Vraska enough to never talk to her again, because then why have her say that?
Right.
There's no, again, you show...
Especially when she's so worried about him getting his memories back.
Yes.
So she hates the fact that he will get his memories back, but she also hates the fact that someone did that to him. Because
now she, at that point at least, she was, whether you say in love with him or infatuated with him or whatever, she felt bad for him. She pitied that someone had done that. And we know that it's Nicol Bolas. She does not, although she does know who Nicol Bolas is and knows that, she even in this story referred to Jace as the second most powerful telepath in the multiverse, because she's aware of Nicol Bolas and aware of how powerful he is. So it'll be interesting to see, again, does Vraska solely just go back to Ravnica? Does she kind of buddy up with the Gatewatch a little bit? Solely against Nicol Bolas because she knows how bad he is. What will come of her finding the immortal sun and sending the spell to that whoever that other planeswalker is, Tezzeret, Ral Zarek, whomever? Because if Jace has his memories of Ravnica back and she calls Ral Zarek and Nicol Bolas didn't know that Jace was going to be there, then Ral Zarek might show up and just be totally shocked by the fact that Jace is there, and with Jace remembering Ravnica, he'll remember Ral Zarek. So that'll be interesting in and of itself.
That'll just be a cluster.
I don't know. I think that might be interesting. We will obviously have to see. There is no certainty to any of what I just said, by any means. I just think that would be cool. I'm making my own fan fiction here, my own headcanon.
I was during the story too, but not in a similar way.
Oh, you're gross. I get to continue my...
There was a lot of semi-kinky language when it came to Watley and Angrath.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's fair. I thought you were talking about Jason Vraska again.
No.
Because I was going to say I could continue my pun of, shipping the two of them because they were both on a ship together alone. And then she was like, I could date this guy.
It's not funny.
Hey, look. Anyway, that's this week's story. As far as I can tell, I haven't seen words for or against it, but I believe that this is the final story. We've had the 5th story spotlight. It seems to make sense that they would put a story that was in 2 parts as the final 2 parts of this story. We will see what happens next week. We will almost definitely be back with something, even if it's not a story review. We'll be back with something, whatever they give us next week.
Yeah.
But this has been another episode of Jar. Thank you for joining us for this story, for all of Ixalan's stories. If you have joined us, you can check out the other videos on our channel. They'll be popping up. Some will be popping up on the screen, wherever, covering my face over Amy's head, covering the snakes and stuff over here. Am I poking you in the face?
Yeah.
Okay. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. There's videos everywhere. They're not here yet. But you can also click on our logo up here to subscribe to our channel and find out when all of our videos come out. Thank you guys for hanging out with us once again as we showed off our...
#Vorthos Pride.
Once again, as I said, this has been Geek for All. This has been Jar. I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.